So again, welcome everyone, and this is a reminder, if you have any questions that come up during the course of Jason's presentation, feel free to leave them in the chat box, and him and I will be able to field them as they come up. So without further ado, it gives me great pleasure to pass the parole, so to pass the microphone to Jason Demeth from Seattle College.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Tara, for the introduction. And it's my pleasure to present to all of you, and this is my first webinar with CCAE. So as Tara said, if you have any questions, please put them in the Q&A section. There will also be a couple of points during the presentation where you'll be able to ask questions. So it's a bit different of a model in terms of you can't put up your hand and I'll see you putting up your hand. So just feel free to ask those questions during that time or to put them here. And it gives me great pleasure to talk about leadership giving. It's something that I've thoroughly enjoyed over the course of my 20 years of experience, and it's something that I've helped establish at a number of organizations, both small and big, educational, as well as health charities. And what I would say is that leadership giving is something that I believe every single charity can benefit from, regardless of the size of the organization itself. So when I talk about leadership giving, basically what I'm talking about is those gifts that are between the low annual gifts and your major gifts. So I'm sure many of you have some gifts that come in on an annual basis that are significantly higher than what your average annual gifts are, and they can come in via the mail, phone, or just come in at random itself. And so today we're going to be talking about that middle ground, so mind the gap. And just to remind you as well, we're talking about annual gifts. We're not talking about gifts that are being given or pledged over a period of years. It's something that is being given annually, and this could be something directed to student awards and designated, or to specific programs like athletics. So what I'd like to ask each of you, just to give us some context, is to define what major gifts are defined as in your organization. Is it 1,000 and up, 2,000, 5,000, 10,000, or 25,000 plus? Just to kind of give us an idea in terms of where you're at. And so just click in the area that applies to yourself. So for example, at Keano College, we define major gifts for individuals at 5,000 plus. So just click on the submit button and we'll see the results in real time. Excellent. So we see here that all of us are 5,000 plus. There's 2 of us that are at 10,000 and 2 at 25,000 plus. So I would probably say that those that are 25,000 plus on the major gift side likely have a leadership giving program. If you don't, it's certainly something that would be encouraged, because when you talk about a gap of annual gifts, between annual gifts and major gifts of $25,000, that's a significant chunk of change, and it's certainly something that a leadership giving program can help. And so when we look at the differences between a major gifts program and leadership giving, when we look at major gifts, typically we're talking about multiple moves involved before the gift is realized. So you could have as many as 4 or 5 cultivation meetings, and then a couple of solicitation meetings, and then a number of stewardship meetings afterwards. While on the leadership giving side, things progress fairly quickly, and you can easily transition from discovery to cultivation to solicitation all in one meeting or move, because typically you're meeting with leadership donors either once or twice a year, while with major gift donors, you'll be meeting with them multiple times. And so when you look at the timelines, on average, you're talking about many months between a solicitation and their response. And even on the cultivation side, you're talking about many months in terms of getting them to the point where you can solicit. Well, as I mentioned, on the leadership giving side, things transpire very quickly. And so you have to be prepared to get into stewardship mode even quicker than you would on the major gift side. And then when we look at the size of the gift, usually on the major gift side, it is significantly higher, as we saw in terms of how your organizations define major gifts. And not only that, the majority of the time, a major gift is designated for a specific purpose. Very rarely is it undesignated. Whereas on the leadership giving side, typically we're talking about $500 to $2,500 to $5,000, or in some of your instances, up to $25,000. And these gifts can be undesignated. This is where they can give to where most needed. There will be times where they designate to a specific area, i.e. student awards or athletics or a specific program, but there are times where it can be undesignated. And then when we look at the ratio of prospects to solicitor, the number of prospects on the major gift side is significantly less because it requires a lot more moves to manage. So you can't have the same number of prospects as you would for a leadership giving officer. So typically you'll see a high number of prospects per solicitor for a leadership giving program, which can be as high as 200 plus. And then when we look at staff experience, you certainly need a much higher staff experience at major gifts, because we're talking about gifts that are $25,000, $100,000, and in some cases $1 million plus. That requires a lot more tact, a greater understanding of the organization, and you're managing many more pieces. While with leadership giving, it doesn't require as much experience. You still need some experience in terms of being able to handle donors one-on-one, and a good experience in terms of the organization itself. The other thing I'd say too is with major gifts, there's times where the gift is pledged over time. So if they're making a $100,000 gift, it might be over a period of 3 to 5 years, while with leadership giving, we're talking about an annual gift. So when we talk about the advantages of a leadership giving program, I'll reiterate here that a leadership giving program will work for both small and large organizations. So even at Keanu College here, where our advancement team is 5 individuals, I can't justify a full FTE for annual giving. So what I've done is I've appointed a 0.4 position, or 0.4 FTE for leadership giving, because of the fact that it's such an important program, especially for developing our major gifts donors. So when we look at advantages of the leadership giving program, it gives your upper end donors a more personalized experience. So basically, you have a number of donors that are giving at the high end of your annual giving program that at the moment, if you don't have a leadership giving program, they're just getting touch points that are en masse. So either a special event or a direct mail or a phone program that you're doing. So it's not as personalized as somebody going and meeting with them face-to-face in a coffee shop and having a conversation with them. It also identifies a future pool of potential major gift donors. So it's an excellent testing ground because you can do a deeper discovery with these individuals, because number one, you're meeting with them face-to-face, where normally these individuals would not be part of a major gifts program unless they've been pre-identified. So by meeting with them, you'll be able to hear where their general interests lie, and as such, you'll be able to customize your ask based on where their passions lie. So it could be on a student award side, it could be athletics, it could be a specific program, but you won't know until you have that deep conversation with them. In addition to that, it is a good potential pool to identify planned giving prospects as well, because you're putting a face to the name, and so by talking to them, you can find out as to what stage of life they're at, have they thought of the university or college in terms of the planned giving mode. And so by meeting with them, you can have those types of conversations, while it's much tougher to do that when you're sending them a direct mail, even though there's a little checkbox that says, have you left a bequest to the university or college? and then they send it back with a little check mark. Well, not everybody is going to do that. Another advantage of leadership giving is it's an effective method of increasing the size of annual gifts. So by soliciting individuals via direct mail and phone, you tend to get a smaller gift than you would by meeting with somebody face-to-face. So your leadership giving program will be able to identify these key prospects that by meeting face-to-face, you're going to increase their gift. And in addition to that, you're going to increase your donor retention because of the personalized approach. So instead of a 5% retention, you should see your leadership annual giving donors retain at a much higher rate, especially through the vetting process, which we're going to talk about after our next question period. And it's also an effective way of transitioning staff into major gifts fundraising. And I'll use myself as an example here. When I first started off in fundraising, I was mainly a program coordinator and then moved into an annual giving coordinator role and saw the advantages of doing a leadership giving program. And that was my first taste of face-to-face fundraising. And so it was a good training ground for me to see, okay, how effective am I in a face-to-face solicitation method with these key donors? And it's something that I thoroughly enjoyed and proved myself at it. And as such, I was able to get a major gifts fundraising position as a result of that experience. And so it's a good way for you to test your own staff as well to see, is this something that they would enjoy? How effective are they? Or maybe you have this rock star that is looking for more experience, and so you'll be able to use your leadership giving program as a way to give them some additional responsibilities that they can then have their own prospects that they're developing and get into experiencing moves management, the cultivation, solicitation, and even on the stewardship side. So it's very beneficial for both your staff as well as your donors. So those would be the key advantages of a leadership giving program. So I'm going to pause here right now for any questions that you might have in terms of the advantages, disadvantages of a leadership giving program before we get into the nitty-gritty details of how do you develop a leadership giving program.
I'd like to remind the participants that your lines are muted, so any questions, please direct them to the chat box, in which case Jason will be able to answer them. So Jason will give everybody a moment if they need to get back to their keyboard, and otherwise if anything comes in, we can move it to the end.
And if I'm going too quick as well, this would be a good time for people to give me some feedback in terms of if I'm speaking too quickly, to slow down. This would be a good time for that. So
I think you're set. You can probably move ahead. And if anybody does have questions, and while Jason's speaking, please continue to put them in the chat box. You can go ahead, Jason.
Okay, excellent. So we've identified the advantages of the leadership giving program, and so I'm sure you guys are wondering, okay, how do we find our prospects now? And also, how many people do you assign to a leadership giving person? So what I've done in the past is essentially look at a couple of things. And the first thing is analyze your data. This is not the time to do acquisition. Your leadership giving program should be looking at warm prospects. So talking about people or identifying people that have given to you in the past. And first thing to look at is, regardless of the size of their gift, look at the number of years that they've been giving consecutively. If you have a mature annual giving program that has been in existence for 10 plus years and going on to, for 2 or 3 decades, this is prime data. So if you've had an annual giving program that you've been soliciting individuals for 20 years, let's say, and you have some prospects that have been giving every single one of those years, that would be at the very top of my list, regardless of the size of gift that they've been giving, because what they've done is that they've shown loyalty to your program. And by meeting with these individuals face-to-face, it gives you a chance to thank them for the years of loyalty, as well as to touch base with them and see, why have you been giving all these years? And maybe they've been giving to a specific program all those years, and touch base with them and see, where are they going? What would they like to accomplish at the university or the college, and get some feedback. And so with these particular individuals, I would probably do 2 meetings, because the first meeting is more a discovery meeting. They'll likely have a check ready for you at that moment, because for many of these people, they've never met with somebody at the college itself. If your annual giving program is less mature, so let's say 10 years or less, I would put at the top of the list those individuals or even companies that have been giving every single one of those years. Now, let's say you do that and your list is only 10 or 15 people, then I would look at those people that have given 75% of the time. So if you've been having an annual giving program for 20 years, look at people that have been giving 15 of those 20 years, especially most recently. And if you have somebody who's lapsed maybe a year or two in the near future or in the near past, this could be a potential way for you to re-engage those people. The next thing to look at is the size of the annual gifts. Do you have somebody that is at that upper echelon of your annual gifts that isn't quite at major gifts level, but is at the upper end of your annual giving? So this could be somebody that is giving $1,000 annually through your DM program or phone, or just sends it in unsolicited. This would be a key individual to include. And so once again, you're taking a look at your whole data and filtering it to basically see whether or not you have a good pool of people to solicit from. And this will provide good feedback and data as to, okay, do we need to allocate a full-time person, a 0.5, or maybe we need to assign more than 2 people. This is going to be key in terms of making the case to your management in terms of, here's why we need a leadership giving program. But first you need to identify who these prospects are. So let's say through your initial data prospecting, you do these 2 things and you only have 50 individuals. Well, then you look at your size of your annual gifts and maybe you reduce it to gifts of 250 plus. And then you see it's like, oh, hey, now we have 500 prospects. And then you just kind of whittle away from there. But you utilize your data first. Now, if some of you have ancillary services, so for us at Keano College, for example, we have a very active theater. And the theater is a community theater that is a community asset of the college, and it's been here since 1980, so it's been 30 years plus that members of the community are purchasing subscriptions. And so what we've done is we looked at the number of individuals that have purchased annual subscriptions, and we have a group of individuals that have bought subscriptions every single year that the theater has been here. And so for us, that is a key group to go to for asks related to the theater itself, because it's something that they've demonstrated loyalty to. Some of them have been making annual gifts on top of that. Some of them have not. But it is a great touch point in seeing as to why they come on an annual basis and making the case in terms of, have you thought of making a leadership gift to the theater itself? And so some of you may have those community assets that you can take a look at, and it's a way of broadening that leadership giving portfolio itself. Now, I'm sure many of you have a major gifts program, and some of you have a prospect management committee. And leadership giving is a great way for you to continue to steward and solicit those major gift donors that have lapsed or need re-engagement, because I've been part of many organizations where they have said no to major gifts, but we still want to keep them re-engaged. And so this would be a great way of re-engaging or keeping engaged those major gift prospects. Or maybe the prospect list of your major gift officers are currently overloaded, and there's no more room for additional prospects. And so this would be another way of engaging with those people and developing those relationships, so that way, once there is room on one of those major gifts officers' lists, that they can then move on to their list itself. It can also be part of the transition plan and or discovery. So let's say somebody is identified in the community that would be a great major gift prospect, but you want to fill them out a bit. You can put them in the leadership giving program to kind of do that discovery, get them giving to the annual giving program, and then as you find out a bit more, then they can transition into the major gifts program. So like I said, there's a number of different ways of identifying your leadership prospects, and for me, I've discovered great success with this. And another key point to mention as well is leadership giving is not just individuals. I would probably say the majority of your prospects will be individuals. However, you can also include companies. And for some cases where you have small businesses, the gifts can come in on the corporate side or on the individual side. And so you can have a mix of either or. So it's not just individuals, it's not just companies, it can be a mixture of both. So then when we talk about how do we cultivate our leadership gifts, so you've identified your prospects, and now you're wanting to go and make those asks. I would say that the techniques for leadership giving don't differ greatly from those of major gifts. What does differ is in terms of the number of moves that are required with regards to getting the gift. And oftentimes, in my experience, when you set that meeting with the donor, they often are prepared and are giving you a check there during the meeting itself. Now, it's up to you and in the situation as to whether or not you accept that check. 90% of the time I am accepting the check, knowing that this is an opportunity for me to build a relationship further so we can look at growing that their support on an annual basis and potentially moving them into a monthly giving program as well, but at a leadership level. So I've had situations where you come in the door, there's like, hey, here's a check for $1,000. It's like, hey, that's awesome, thank you very much. And then you have a conversation about the school itself and the priorities and talking to them about, you know, why they give and give them an opportunity to provide feedback on the school itself, and then you keep in touch. You often want to have that face-to-face meeting because you will have much better success, and it's about relationship building. It's not just about the gift anymore. And for many of these individuals and companies, they're used to being touched upon in a way that requires a gift immediately, i.e. via the phone or via direct mail. And so they're not used to having this relationship building mode, which is face-to-face, where there's time to make a gift. And that's another thing as well that you have to be mindful of, is that many of these people that you're meeting with have never, ever met with somebody from the organization or a charity for that matter. So this is completely new to them. And so for some, they're a bit gun-shy in the sense that, oh, why is this person wanting to meet with me? It's like, oh, no, save your time. You know, you don't need to meet with me. I'm going to make my annual gift. But you have to reassure them in the sense that, you know, they're being met with because they've shown loyalty. They're a valued member of the college and university, and you're wanting to get their feedback and thank them in person. And so they're usually taken aback. It's like, wow, you actually want my feedback and you want to take the time to meet with me? It's like, wow, I've never had that before. That's so unique, and it's really empowering when you have those types of meetings with these donors because they've never had that personal touch point. And that's, you know, going back to the advantages of the leadership giving program. This is huge. And this is a huge win for the organization and something that you'll be able to continue to cultivate over time and bring them into the inner circles of the university and college. So with that said, you have to be mindful of how many prospects you are assigning to your leadership giving officer, because in the instance of here at Keano College, I don't have a dedicated full-time person for leadership giving. And this is something entirely new for Keano as well. And so what I've done is I've allocated a 0.4 FTE to this individual. So they're managing other aspects of annual giving, including direct mail, as well as some other events that we organize here at the college itself, as well as our Adopt a Athlete program. And so it's not their full-time job, but it's a portion of. Yet there's a lot of relationship building that needs to happen, especially if we want to move them from leadership giving to major giving, because we haven't done a lot on the individual major give side here at the college, because a lot of it has been on the corporate giving. And so this is a way of us warming those individuals up to giving at a 5,000 plus level. So it's easing them into that giving level. The other way that you'll be able to cultivate your leadership gifts is by inviting them to events where you're currently inviting your major gift donors. So these are events that currently exist for your organization that in the past they've been dedicated only to the major gift donors, but what I would encourage you to do is invite your leadership donors to these events as well, so that you can cultivate more than one person at a time and get them on campus, get them interacting with donors, etc. And not only that, but making sure that your leadership giving officers are at the prospect management table, because it's important for your leadership giving officers to hear the feedback on major gift donors, and vice versa, your major gift donors to hear feedback in terms of some of your prospects that you're working with on the leadership giving side, because you never know when that transition will happen in terms of leadership to major gifts and the opposite, major gifts to leadership. So let's say you had your leadership giving officer at the prospect management committee table for a year, and there's a major gift donor that they've been trying to get to give to the capital campaign at $25,000, and they're just not there yet, and they just feel that the timing's not right. Well, guess what? That prospect can now move over to the leadership giving program, so that way they can continue to be solicited, but for a smaller gift, but they're still engaged with the organization itself. And that is critical, because I've seen it happen where, you know, that major gift prospect suddenly falls off the table, and now they're in that, you know, twilight zone, you know, that gap between major gifts and high-end annual giving, that nothing's being done with them. So now 2 years has lapsed. They have not been solicited for an annual gift, nor have they been solicited for a major gift, and guess what? You're losing that relationship, and eventually they're going to move off somewhere else. So when we talk about cultivating leadership gifts, some of them may have already had some touch points with a major gift prospect, but now they're still getting met with on a face-to-face basis. So something key to remember. So now on the leadership side, when we talk about our leadership, I meant stewarding leadership donors, one of the most critical things that you can do is create a specific recognition group for these individuals. And the reason why this is important is you want to show that it is exclusive, that they're part of this special group, and they are, that they want to be members of. Because for some of you, you may have predefined annual giving levels in terms of recognition, in terms of your annual report that says, you know, these are donors between 200 and 500 and 500 and above. And this is a way of providing that extra little oomph in terms of that recognition, especially for those that are looking for that recognition, and they want to be seen as part of this group. They don't want to be singled out, but they want to be part of this group that is shown to providing these leadership gifts for the university itself. And so providing unique benefits, providing personalization, including hand signatures of your receipts and or thank you letters from the president themselves. I've seen some universities who are able to develop a special brand just for leadership giving, that their envelopes on the outside are branded to leadership giving, and so they know when they're receiving this envelope that it is coming from the president's office, they're part of this special club, etc. Now, some of you may not have the budget for that type of recognition, but there's things that you can easily do that don't cost money in terms of recognition on the website, recognition in your annual reports, or even having events where you personally recognize your leadership donors either as a group or individually. And these are very important, especially if you want to build that relationship and get them to the point where they're going to be making major gifts later on. I would also invite them to your stewardship events that major gift donors are attending, assuming that you have the capacity for it. So that way, once again, they're in that mix of the major gift donors, and it also enables your leadership giving officers to feel part of the major gifts group as well, because many of your leadership giving officers will transition into major gifts. And so it's a good way for them to get used to those events and see the major gift prospects that may become their major gift prospects later on in the future. And the key thing here in terms of stewardship is the more personal, the better it is. So how do we define success? So we talked about, the process itself, and now for many of you, if you don't have a leadership giving program, you're like, oh my gosh, I want to do this. How do I do this? You have to define success and attract the success itself, because if you're going to make the case for a leadership giving program, you want to be able to define the parameters of success. And so one of the key things that you want to monitor is the number of upgrades from leadership gifts. So once you make that magical transition from your current program to including a leadership giving program, you want to see upgrades for your leadership gift donors. So if they're currently giving 250 plus, well, you should see them giving at a higher level. So say that same person who gave 250, they're giving $1,000. So you'll be able to show that out of your 200 leadership prospects, you've increased 75% of those gifts. And it's like, wow, that's amazing. And it's because of that personalized touch point in creating that leadership giving program. The other thing, your retention. So many of you know that in a DM program, you're achieving a 5 to 10% gift level with your lapsed donors and retained donors. And so you should see a higher retention rate with your leadership giving donors. And I would dare say that because you're investing more time and effort on this, that it should be 75% plus, which will be your highest retention method of anything you're doing in the annual giving program, which further makes the case for why you should have a leadership giving program. The other thing, and this is something that's going to be tracked over time, is the number of donors from your leadership giving program that move into major gifts, and subsequently the success rate of those leadership donors that move to major gifts. So you should see a higher success rate of leadership donors moving to major gifts, i.e. meaning that your major gift donors that were previously leadership donors will be more likely of making a major gift or a higher success rate than those that have never been through the leadership giving program itself. And once again, that's something that's going to be tracked over time, but unless you're paying attention to that stat, you're not going to be monitoring it. And then the other thing is the number of donors giving at a leadership giving level. So you should see this number increase over time because you have a higher retention rate, and those that are coming in new, they should be the success rate with those leadership donors should be much higher itself. And so you're going to be seeing your number of leadership donors year over year increase as the program matures. And for many of you, especially if you're starting off from scratch, this is going to continue for years. For those that may have a mature leadership giving program, you're going to continue to have the same challenges that you would with any annual giving program, where you're going to have people falling off and new people coming on. So long as your net donors is a positive number, then that's a good thing. If it ever gets into the negatives, which generally sometimes with a mature leadership giving program, it can happen, but it's not a sign that, oh, we should abandon our leadership giving program. That's not what we're saying here. What we're saying is, it's just something to monitor, but for many of us who have never had a leadership giving program, it's going to take many years before you get there. So these are key stats for any leadership giving program you should be monitoring itself. So, making the case for a leadership giving program. Going back to one of our slides previously, analyze your data first and show how many qualified leadership donors you have to work with. So I'm going to move back to that slide. There we go. So looking at this, you analyze your data, you have consecutive years of giving, the size of your annual gifts, you have your other sources of revenue, and you have your current major gift prospects that are not currently being solicited, or they're falling within, that, what do we do with them? So qualify those donors and identify how many people would fall within that leadership giving program. So when I did that for one of the health charities that I was working with, we had a list of over 500 individuals that would be like prime, like very high likelihood that they would be able to make a leadership gift. And when you go to an organization and say, look, there is more than enough prospects for a full-time FTE to be able to solicit these prospects, where number one, we're going to have a higher retention rate. Number two, we're going to be able to upgrade their gift. And number three, vet them to see as to who could potentially make a major gift and ultimately a planned gift. It's really hard for the senior leadership team of an organization to say no to that, especially when you tell them, like, look, this is guaranteed to make money, especially based on their past giving. And that's the key thing here, is looking at past giving. So that is your number one ace in the hole in terms of making the case for a leadership giving program. Talk about the advantages in the short and long term of the program itself. So in the earlier part of this presentation, we talked about the advantages both to your staff as well as to the donor itself. So keep that top of mind. Determine a trial period and develop a plan of action. So for your senior leadership team that are humming and hawing in terms of, okay, do we do this? Do we not do this? Look at a trial period where you can test this out. Because there's not going to be any great harm, especially with your people that are giving on an annual basis, of losing these donors. I mean, if anything, what's going to happen is you're going to have a higher retention rate and upgrade their gift during this trial period. So whether that's trial period a year, 2 years, determine that and present that to your senior leadership team and say, look, give me a year to prove my case, and if at the end of the year we don't increase our gifts, don't increase our retention, and don't identify major gifts prospects, then look, we won't continue with the program itself. And it goes back to that next bullet, defining what success will look like. So define what those parameters will look like in terms of, so that way at the end of the trial period you can say, look, we checked the box on all of these except for this one. And then the senior management team can say, okay, you know what? Let's keep on going with this. So then at the end, it's executing the strategy itself. And if you remember at the beginning of the presentation itself, it doesn't mean you have to allocate one full-time equivalent staff member to this program itself. You can also do like I did here at Keano, where I'm allocating here 0.4, but you can also allocate a 0.25. So you can test this out with your annual donors and identify 50 potential leadership prospects that you're going to work with and see whether or not this is something that you should continue in your organization. So regardless of your 2 staff, 10 staff, or 50 staff, this is something that you should be doing. It just depends on how big you go, and it also depends on how many prospects you define. So the key thing here is test it out. And that is it in terms of questions, or in terms of my presentation itself. So we'll open it up to questions from yourselves. And I see here from Whitney that we have a question about what kind of material do you bring on a leadership giving meeting? Which is a great question, by the way. And I would bring pretty well the same material that a major gift donor would bring for their meeting itself. Now, you probably, and I would caution people on developing material just for your leadership giving program, unless you have a huge number of prospects and you have a larger marketing budget. I would say don't spend the extra money in terms of developing materials for the cultivation and solicitation of the ask. Use existing materials that you have with you. It's a less formal process than major gifts, and that's why you don't need as much information. I usually bring with me information on the college or university or the charity that I'm representing, and leave them with something. And for the individual, the most meaningful thing is that you're there meeting with them. That is the most meaningful thing that they'll have. And so answering their questions and touching base with them after the fact is the most critical thing that you can do. The other thing is on the stewardship side. So you may not have to develop something special for them on the cultivation side, but you should have something special developed for them on the stewardship side so that they feel that they're part of something special and exclusive. I would say this is probably more important than on the major gift side, because you're creating a habit, and this is the first time that they've done a stretch. Because if you recall, in terms of annual gifts are typically something that they're capable of doing on an annual basis. It doesn't take a lot of thought, especially through the channels that you've been soliciting them via phone as well as via mail. Now that you're meeting with them face-to-face, you're asking them to give at a higher level than they've ever given in the past, and you have to back that up, and your stewardship of that gift is going to be absolutely critical, and developing materials for that will be very important here. So once again, any other questions, put it in the participant feedback, because that's the only way for me to know that you guys have a question. So please pass them on now, because this is your chance to get some feedback or answer some questions that you may have.
I am unmuting some of the lines as well, so if anybody does have a question at this time, they can actually speak it out. Seems to be minimal amounts of noise on the line.
Wow, this is an easy group.
You want to go ahead and fill that? Should you advertise that your leadership giving level offers a gift to those donors?
Well, typically what I've done in the past is there's not specifically a gift that you're giving them. It's more on the stewardship materials themselves. So, for example, what I've seen with some larger universities is they have a president's club that is developed, and their letterhead, so the envelope that they're receiving is from the president's office itself. And so it's purposely done that way, especially in the U.S. I mean, the U.S. do a phenomenal job with leadership giving. They also have larger budgets, and they also have many more people giving in this program itself. But it's quite phenomenal in terms of the extent that they go. But even as minimal as having the president sign their thank you letter is very meaningful, because once again, it's all about the personalization here, but it doesn't mean that you're giving them something physical in their hands itself that like a keepsake. And oftentimes for many of these donors, they're not wanting you to spend any money on them. Well, not in the situation where they're being handed something. They won't mind if there's something personalized in terms of like a envelope itself, and having a signature by the president doesn't cost a penny. But to these people, it means the world, because for many of your leadership giving donors, especially those that have been identified as a consecutive donor of 20 years plus, we're typically talking about a baby boomer or a more senior donor that to them, that personalization is very meaningful, because it's just something that they are expecting and would like to see, but have not been getting to this point. Any other questions from people on the line or in the feedback box? Okay, well, hearing none, if you do have any other questions, here's my contact information. Feel free to give me a call, email me. I would love to even hear about your successes, or if you need assistance in terms of making the case to your senior leadership team. Because for me, I think the most difficult part of leadership giving is making the case to your senior leaders that they allocate time and effort to this particular program. But I can assure you that it's one of those things that if you're not doing, you should be doing, even at a 0.25, because the benefits are just outstanding, and it's beneficial to you as staff as well as to your donors. And your organization will reap the benefits of this for many years. And I think it's that next level of service that will be very impactful to your donors, especially those that you're able to identify through your data analysis in terms of which ones would be great leadership donors. And I can tell you from a personal basis that is very meaningful when you meet with these donors who have never ever met with a fundraising professional, and seeing them just so appreciative of you taking the time and meeting with them in their home or in a coffee shop. It's quite phenomenal, and it's something that I remember to this day, all of those meetings I've had with these people whom this was the first time they were meeting a fundraising professional. And so I look forward to hearing you guys' feedback and encourage you to do this. And yeah, so keep in touch, and it was a pleasure doing this for you today.
Great. Thank you so much, Jason. And for those of you on the line, you will receive an evaluation just after this wraps up. So please feel free to share any feedback or comments there. And if there's anything you'd like to revisit, this has been recorded. And as Jason said, he so graciously has extended his information if you'd like to follow up. So thank you, everybody, for joining us, and we hope to see you again in April. Have a great day.
Take care. Bye.
Thank you.